the departure wasn't because of the incident, but it was how the Warriors handled it. You brought up that there was no African-American brass to have them sit down and help squash it. And also the point that KD just got past this when they were on the same team again at these Olympics that just happened in Tokyo. Go wherever
That
you
was the
want. I
text
didn't
I
know if there
received.
was more information
Yeah.
on that you want to discuss, or what we just heard about the burner
It's
account
all.
and some other items.
Well, I'll go to Max. I'll go to Max after I say this point.
Okay.
It's just for clarification. I'm not trying to say that the person was saying, nor was implying that there are no African Americans employed by the organization. I don't want the people to take that message from it. Even though I haven't asked and I haven't investigated that matter, there's a lot of folks within the Warriors organization that I know and I'm very close to, and I've got profound respect for that organization. I think they're first class. I think they've got a lead counsel there by the name of David Kelly and what have you, and along with other African Americans that work within the organization, if I remember correctly. The issue that the person had texted me about and was talking about is something in a roundabout manner we've alluded to when we've talked about the paucity of African-American coaches at one time, how some of those openings needed to be filled by African-Americans, how ultimately African-Americans within the executive ranks needed to be addressed. Because there was no one of African-American descent that had any kind of cachet within the organization in folks' eyes that could have brought KD and Draymond together. That's the perception league-wide, no matter where you turn. It's not about numbers. It's not about bodies. It's about individuals of African-American descent employed by those organizations. And what kind of power and influence are they truly granted to cultivate relationships and make a difference, to really have that impact? Because one of the untold stories, Max, is that you have a lot of these white executives in positions of power. And even though there are black people employed, those executives are incredibly guarded. They keep people at bay because they want to be the ones to have the relationship. They don't want you to be the one to do so because that could pose a threat, because ultimately your relationship with the players can elevate to such a degree that you ultimately become empowered and you could have usurped their authority and rendered them null and void. There's a lot of guys in the professional ranks, basketball, football, etc., that have those issues in the respective organizations that they work for, and it limits their ability to really have the kind of influence they think they deserve. And the players notice this kind of stuff, and they've talked about it periodically. That's what I
mean, I think that's something that should be said and talked about. You know, you've brought up how even when you have African-American executives in the NBA, for example, how many of them are actually the last word under the ownership, which, by the way, is also almost all white. Under ownership, that how many of them have final say, really? You could talk about Masai Ujiri, who is African, I guess Canadian now, but like that, but not African American in the way the phrase is meant.
That was the embarrassing part, Max. The only black person that had power in the NBA up until recently wasn't even an African American. He was an African.
Right, and not in
America. And he was coaching,
in Canada.
And he was running an organization in Canada. Nobody in America had that kind of power.
He's an African North American. Yeah. So I think that's obviously something worthy of discussion. I want to talk about, though, I want to focus on my big takeaway from that is it felt like I can't overstate how significant the interview felt for me. And I know there's only one Draymond Green. Not any athlete can do this, although you think about all the smoke and different podcasts like that are making waves because you have guys able to get athletes because they are sometimes former, sometimes current athletes who've been through similar experiences, and provided they're also intelligent and fearless, right? As many of the guys who are athletes and former athletes in media are. There are a lot of great guys who fit that description, including many who work here at ESPN that we have on this show all the time. It just felt like something about this interview felt like a turning point in media history to me, even. The way Draymond was able to get KD to talk about stuff and the level of respect KD has for Draymond, which is obvious because Draymond's experienced a lot of the same stuff. I want to talk about Naomi Osaka, Stephen A., and the reason I'm thinking about her, and we were talking about her earlier. Part of what she said, the reason she got emotional from the question asked a couple days ago, the reason she came back to it a couple days later, is she said she almost feels guilty about how good she has it, knowing what's going on in the world, and then also feels like guilty because she has to feel bad. She can't even acknowledge it. She can't even really savor it and appreciate her good fortune, which she's earned, because she's made to feel bad constantly. Like, what am I doing something wrong? Every time I talk to the media, something's bad. I did something bad. I understand where a guy like Kevin Garnett or LeBron James, for example, or Naomi Osaka must wake up in the morning and think, wait a minute, I'm so great at what I do. As you bring up constantly, I'm philanthropic. I have empathy for people. I want to make the world a better place, not just be one of the greatest performers of all time in my sport, right? Why is it that half the things said about me, it seems, are negative? If you're going to talk about me, you're going to say, 50% of the stuff is negative? Maybe if 1% of the stuff was negative, okay, no one's perfect. But why so much negative? And the answer and the reason athletes as interviewers, I think, are really important right now, the answer is the perfect is boring. And all the good stuff you do, we understand. But as I constantly say, it's not just about following the ball and the score. So much of this industry connects with people because they're characters. We tell a story through characters. Who are they? What makes them tick? What are their goals? How great is the obstacle? What are their fatal flaws, right? We need to flesh that out in order to make the story interesting to us, to the audience. And by the way, the players are aware of this, obviously, on some level. It's the reason Superman is not as interesting a superhero as Spider-Man, right? The invincible character is with almost no flaws. There's one thing, kryptonite, right? Everything else is perfect. Is not as interesting as the fully fleshed out human character with lots of flaws. But coming from us, coming from people in the media who have not experienced what they've experienced, the questions will tend to the athlete, as Kevin Durant alluded to, seem more general, less focused, not real. It betrays a lack of intimate knowledge about what he's actually going through. Therefore, the question is less relevant. He's less inclined to engage with it. It feels more like an attack than a genuine trying to draw out the truth. I mean, that conversation was illuminating in that way. And I don't think anyone but Draymond could have conducted an interview with KD that would have elicited those kind of responses.